Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd also like to congratulate the Right Honourable Member for Chesham and Amersham and the other sponsors of this really important backbench business committee debate for ensuring that the House can discuss this very important issue of autism today. And I'd also like to echo the remark made by my honourable friend for Hayward and Middleton. We've had many excellent contributions today, but in particular, if I can thank the contributions from those honourable members who have shared their experience as parents of children with autism. It's really added to our discussion and debate today. I welcome and support one of the central calls in the motion for an enhanced national awareness campaign. Raising the profile and public understanding of autism would break down some of the stigma, tackle the prejudices and help explain the condition to those who remain unaware of the realities of autism. I must pay credit to the work of the charities working in this field, including the National Autistic Society, Autistica and Ambitious for Autism, in fighting for those people with autism and their families, campaigning for proper diagnosis, decent treatment, social acceptance and full, productive and dignified lives for people with autism. And I also commend the many organisations, campaigns, towns and cities who are doing so much to raise awareness. There have been so many during this debate, and I've only got 8 minutes, so if honourable members will forgive me for not mentioning them all at this point. The National Autistic Society has brought some important survey evidence to our attention. We've already heard it, but it's worth reiterating that whilst nearly almost all of our population, almost all of the country, have heard about autism, just 16% has any real understanding of the condition. And this reveals a huge gulf between awareness and understanding, which is why a national campaign to develop better awareness of the realities of autism would be a very welcome development. It should be led by and involve fully people with autism and their families so that the campaign is authentic and focused on the issues that really matter. Research by Ambitious for Autism highlights two very important specific audiences, and again these points have been raised by many honourable and right honourable members during the debate today, teachers in particular, because 40% of teachers say that they lack the knowledge that they need, and employers and job centres, because while 99% of young people with autism say that they want to work, only 15% of adults with autism are in employment. And it's clear that people with autism and their families face terrible prejudice and stigma. The National Autistic Survey figures show that too many people with autism and their families feel socially isolated, don't go out because they're worried about how the public will react to their autism. And as my honourable friend for Lancaster and Fleetwood shared, people don't understand what a meltdown is. And people have been asked to leave a public space because of behaviour associated with their autism. And this presents a picture of social isolation and daily humiliation. Autism is a condition which means people have difficulty interpreting the world around them. And yet this condition is compounded by the reactions and hostility of other people. And it's obvious that we are a long way from our public spaces being safe places for all people with autism. I welcome the fact that my own city in Liverpool has started a bid to become the first, or one of the first, autism-friendly cities. But we need to become an autism-friendly nation. When the Minister responds, I hope he will address the issue. The Minister said from a sedentary position, he mentioned Manchester, and I note the remarks made by my honourable friend as well. I hope the Minister, when he responds, will address the issue of awareness, stigma and prejudice, and I hope that he'll also commit to supporting the Autism Friendly Awards to ensure that our public buildings and public spaces are autism friendly. And I am pleased that the House of Commons has started work on this earlier in the year, and I hope we can make progress to ensure that our workplace here becomes an autism-friendly place of work. We've heard from many contributions during the debate about the challenges related to the Department of Health, but I'd also like to ask the Minister if he can tell us what efforts individual government departments and agencies beyond the Department of Health are making to support people with autism, and which of those departments and agencies has an up-to-date strategy for dealing with autism, and if they don't, what commitments he will make today to ensure that they do. If I can turn to the second substantive point of the motion today concerning the length of time that it takes to diagnose someone with autism, and it's been raised by so many honourable members on all sides of the House today. Autism, Madam Deputy Speaker, requires an early diagnosis so that the individuals with autism and their families are properly supported. And as we've heard, adults are having to wait more than 2 years for a diagnosis, and for children, the figure now stands at 3.6 years. On my weekly visits across the country, I hear many of the stories that have been echoed in the chamber today, and in my own city, in Liverpool, there are no fewer than 700 families waiting for an assessment. It's totally unacceptable, it's far too long, it compounds the condition and makes a bad situation worse. And I've heard firsthand from the Liverpool Autistic Children's Alliance, a parent support group which meets in my constituency, about the very specific concerns that they have and experience while waiting for a diagnosis, particularly around education. Again, a point made today, not getting an education, health and care plan. The fact that those parents therefore don't get access to support and training to help them to support their children, and also challenges in accessing appropriate education. We've heard that the NICE quality standard on autism makes it clear that once referred, people should wait no longer than 3 months before having their first diagnostic appointment. And this standard is clearly not being met across the country. It means that thousands of people are being let down. And given the importance of prompt and accurate diagnosis, I hope the Minister can give us a commitment today to ask NHS England to report autism diagnosis waiting times for every single clinical commissioning group in the country, and then to hold them to account when the waits are too long. I hope the Minister will also ensure that NHS England's new autism care pathway includes and reduces those diagnostic waiting times. We know that research presented by Autistica, drawn up by the LSC, has shown that the costs associated with autism are more than cancer, heart disease and stroke combined. It's at least £32 billion every year, including expenditure on hospital services, home health care, special educational facilities and respite care, as well as lost earnings for both people with autism and their parents. But despite this cost, the outcomes for people with autism remain so poor, and we've heard again during the debate today about those comorbidities, about people experiencing extremely high rates of mental illness, poor physical health, social exclusion, lack of employment and education opportunities, and tragically, Madam Deputy Speaker, early deaths. We've had a number of contributions discussing and raising the issue about the amount spent on awareness. But research also has the power to improve all of these poor outcomes. Research currently being spent on autism remains incredibly low. It's just £3 million a year, and that is a paltry amount given the scale of the challenge. And as Shadow Minister for Mental Health, I've been aware that mental illness is also a huge challenge for people with autism. People with autism are far more likely to have at least one mental health condition, and the burden of anxiety and depression for people with autism is vast. And we've had many personal accounts during the course of the debate today, something that, again, I hope the Minister will address in his remarks. I just want to conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, on a really important point about the fact that too many people with autism in our country are dying too young. And the figures really are startling if we look at the research that was shared and was in the press only a few months ago. People on the autistic spectrum die 18 years earlier than the general population, and for autistic people with a learning disability, this figure rises to 30 years earlier. That cannot be acceptable in 2016 in our country, and we know that those with learning disabilities are at a greater risk of suicide in particular. And I think the most disturbing statistic is that overall, people with autism are at 9 times higher risk of committing suicide than the typical population. It is a scandal. I raise it during this debate because we've heard from other contributions it's a particularly specific and pertinent issue that needs addressing, but particularly in light of the fact that suicide prevention services are not providing autism-appropriate services. I know from listening and hearing representations from many autism organisations that phone lines in particular for people that might be having suicidal thoughts are not appropriate for someone with autism, and I hope in his remarks the Minister will address this issue around suicide prevention strategies and ensuring that they are appropriate for people with autism. I welcome this debate. We've had many superb and thoughtful speeches today, and I hope that the families listening to our deliberations will feel that we are addressing their very many concerns, and I look forward to the Minister's reply.